It's a big week for American politics with Congress returning from their summer break. Speaker Johnson is preparing to fight for the SAVE Act, and Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are set to debate tomorrow night. So Chris Bedford, senior editor for politics and Washington correspondent for Blaze Media, wrote about the significance of this week in his latest piece at theblaze.com. And he joins us now to break it all down, along with Blaze TV host Stu Burguiere, who will be breaking down all of the Electoral College for us coming up as well. But Chris, let's start with you. Let's set the scene for the week. What should we be watching out for?
Well, there's a couple things coming down, and I'll start with the smaller stuff that's still important. The House of Representatives is back in session. The House and the Senate have been gone for over a month now on vacation, or at least back in their home districts. I know there's plenty still to do. So now there's going to be a bunch of votes coming through, and Speaker Johnson is set for his first showdown yet with Mitch McConnell, the head of the Republicans in the Senate. That's because Johnson is backing what most Republicans want, what Donald Trump wants, what even the donors want, by attaching the SAVE Act, which would block or make it actually more difficult for illegal aliens and non-citizens to vote in American elections, attaching that to a short-term spending bill that would cover government spending into the new year and the next administration. Now, Mitch McConnell doesn't like that. He doesn't want the fight. He doesn't want to risk a shutdown, but we've talked about it a lot of times in the show. I think it's a pretty strong move by Johnson. And we'll see, of course, if he ends up just saying, oh, we gave it our best shot. Congress loves to do that. And then just throw up his hands and say, sorry, guys, the Democrats are in charge of my slim Republican majority. He does that a lot. So it'll be interesting to see where that pressure comes down. But of course, the main event, which I can't wait to cover live with y'all tomorrow, is going to be the debate. I mean, Kamala Harris is someone who hasn't been out in public. She's done one, I think, 16 or 17-minute video that was interview that was with her VP. Everything else has been scripted. Just today is the first day she's even posted any kind of policies to her page, and most of them are just attacking Donald Trump. The media has tried to sell her as some kind of agent of change, but she doesn't actually seem to have ideas or be willing to go out there. She's far from, they're trying to make her into a Barack Obama, but she's not Barack Obama by any stretch. So Tuesday night's debate, we'll actually see her out there. We'll see how she performs. But don't expect her to implode on stage. She's capable. She's been trained enough to not do as poorly as she did in 2020 in the primaries. But I do expect that she's going to need a rock star night because she's starting to sag in these polls.
Chris, on the budget stuff, is there any reason to believe this isn't just like fantasy league trading? Like it's just not real? I look at the SAVE Act, it would be something that obviously would be good for the country. It's obviously a good thing, but we've talked to Mike Lee about it, talked to Chip Roy about it. They're really excited about pushing this, but at the end of the day, the moderates in the House are not going to allow a shutdown no matter what. The Democrats have to know that, right?
I think the Democrats are going to try and push that. Here's the deal what they have, though. The shutdown right now, the moderates caucus that was really anti-shutdown to begin with was a lot of the guys who were around the D.C. Beltway area, representing parts of Northern Virginia, for example, who got their butts kicked when there was a shutdown because there are so many federal employees coming back. That stuff is kind of gone. A lot of those Republican districts, in part because of these fights and also because of the expanding government workforce, they don't have the same say that they used to have. And here's another interesting thing that makes us different from the Obamacare fights or other fights that you've seen in the House of Representatives in the past, is this is a very popular message. This is popular with Democrats. It's popular with independents. It's popular with moderates. It's popular generally across the board. Democrats are stuck in the difficult messaging battle. Now, they have more access to bigger guns and corporate media, so that, of course, is always going to help. And Mitch McConnell's saying, listen, I don't want any fights. And like you said, being disappointed is pretty standard when you follow this sort of stuff in D.C. But the messaging is so strong, and the caucus actually so much more unified. Their ability, for example, to make money off of forcing this vote, to be able to fundraise off of it and say, Democrats want illegal aliens to vote. What are you going to do? Will be tough. And it puts a lot of Democrats, especially some of the vulnerable ones in the Senate, in very difficult positions.
All right, gentlemen, let's get nerdy with the Electoral College, shall we? Because Nate Silver has put out his latest bulletin, and it actually has Donald Trump winning the Electoral College 312 to 226. Now, Stu, I watched the Stu Does America election special, where you had your own chalkboard. It wasn't even Glenn's chalkboard. It's your own chalkboard that you had out doing the Electoral College. So break this down for us. What do you think of what Nate Silver is putting out? Is it correct? Do we think that Trump has this kind of momentum right now?
Nate Silver's an interesting guy because he's been around for a long time. He goes back to, he was at 538, which was with ABC at the end and Disney. Before that, he was with the New York Times. Before that, he was just an independent blogger and just doing that. And I remember reading his stuff way back. In fact, he was one of the first people that I ever read that called the possibility of a Tea Party revolution back in 2010. He was back in 2009 talking about that. And he got kind of famous because in 2012, he said Barack Obama was going to win, so all the Democrats liked him. And then in 2016, he said that Donald Trump was going to lose. And so all the Democrats got mad at him because he got that one wrong, even though he was much more, again, he's giving a probabilistic prediction. So I think he was something like 34%, something like that, or 28%. It was 28% chance that Trump was going to win, which was higher than almost every other projection at that time. And obviously he wasn't, I wouldn't say right on that, but he was closer to being right. And then 2020, he predicted Biden, and Biden won. He likes to go against the grain a little bit. I think he likes irritating mainstream media types, even though he's a Democrat. He's no Trump fan by any means. His prediction is, I would say, of all the stuff that I read from all these guys, he's about as optimistic for Trump right now as anybody is. He is maybe even a little bit more optimistic than I am, honestly, at this point. He says, I think it's 64.8% chance today of Donald Trump winning the election. Part of this is the way his model works around basically, Kamala Harris had this kind of big rise that we all kind of remember, this boomlet that after the Joe Biden thing disintegrated. They put Kamala in. She has this nice month of positive media. She rises way up. The way his model works, and most of them do, they have a convention bounce estimate. So they assume a 2 or 3 point bounce for the candidate during a convention. You get all this glowing media coverage. Well, she had just come out of a month of glowing media coverage, so there really wasn't any more room for her to bounce. When she didn't bounce up at that period, his model said, well, wait a minute, why isn't she going up? This must be negative for her. So his model adjusted up the chances of Donald Trump winning because they didn't see that bump. I'd argue the bump kind of already happened. If you take the bump out of his projections, Trump, I think, is still a very slight favorite. So what he's seeing is, I think, what the polls are showing as well, which is Kamala is known for this, right? In 2019, she had 2 little boomlets. One that happened right when she launched. She had a really good launch. Crowds everywhere, big speeches, very well produced. When she's in that mode, she's actually somewhat effective. When she can be very much on script and really manage that process, she's not terrible. The second one came after she had a very rehearsed moment in the debate, calling Joe Biden a racist, which is just hilarious. That's how she got that second boom. And she moved in prediction markets. She actually led the field 2 times in 2019, led the field ahead of Bernie Sanders, ahead of Joe Biden. Both times, as we remember, they collapsed. The second one, thanks to Tulsi Gabbard, memorably. But when you look at the way this is going, it's not surprising that she would start to fade. There's just no meat here, right? You guys have seen it. She's not saying anything.
She finally put policies out on her website last night.
I missed it. I was so mad. We were talking about today, and I missed the policy bait. She's finally got one. But almost all of her policies are things that she's essentially trying to push herself to the right. And Bernie Sanders said this over the weekend. Ed Markey said it a few weeks ago. She is she's not flip-flopping. These are not pure flip-flops. What she's doing is saying, I pragmatically want to win this election, so I'm going to hide the left-wing positions I have and float out through representatives these more moderate positions that actually care about border security. It's a lie. She is the same person she was in 2019. That's how she will govern if she's elected.
So, that makes a lot of sense to me, and certainly I agree that there is no there there, and when there's no there there, there's a certain element that you just can't hide. She's not someone who can hide the fact that there's nothing to hide. Mm. Some people can. I don't think she can. But nonetheless, what I want to hear in the time we have left from both of you is thoughts about the very complicated question of polling itself, right? In 2020, Trump was ahead, or was he?
Right.
I mean, do you think that we've gotten better at polling or worse? And can we trust the polls?
What I always like to say about the polls is people want them to be these things that tell us specifics. And what they do is tell us generalities, and people hate that. So, I mean, really, like, we just expect too much out of them. A poll that is really valuable to tell us, for example, this is a close election. It is not valuable to tell us whether Donald Trump or Kamala Harris is up by a half a point. It's just not going to be that specific. Now, 2022 actually was a really good year for polls. It had a smaller error than some other years. 2020, as we all know, right, was a year where it was Biden was heavily favored and the election was super close. 2016, Hillary Clinton was very favored. Donald Trump wound up winning. But what we forget sometimes, 2022 was the opposite. It went toward Democrats, the polling error. 2012 was the same thing. Mitt Romney was right there in that election and wound up losing in an election that wasn't memorably close. Those polling errors bounce around. There's a lot of things you can look at. We kind of have a new tool we're going to be releasing here in the next week or so that kind of tries to take all this stuff and put it into one number, because now there are like election models and polling averages and prediction markets and all that. And we're going to put all that into one model so that everyone can kind of understand it as easily as possible, at least understand what these polls are saying. To your point, though, every single year it gets harder to poll. Every single year there's less money to spend on it. Every single year people don't want to participate in these polls. It gets more and more difficult to get accurate representations as to what's going on.
All right, Bedford, give us your final thoughts. Bring us home your thoughts on polling.
I think Stu's exactly right. Probably knows more than I'll ever forget on this sort of thing, or forget more than I'll ever know on this sort of thing. And that's one of the things that he touched on at the very end there that you have to keep in mind when you're looking at focus groups, when you're looking at polls, is the people who answer focus groups are those people you pull off the road and you can get to sit in a room for 8 hours in exchange for pizza. So they're not exactly representative of a lot of other folks that you might see around the country, a lot of people who are going to be voting. The one thing I would caution, though, on these polls and the optimism is a lot of them are really, especially Nate Silver's model here, and also Kornacki, who's been talking about this, really are counting on the shy Trump voters. Those people, how Donald Trump has actually won more votes each election than he has been polling for, and that they say would bode very well for the president, or former president. But this time, I think voters may be a little bit less shy. It's been 4 years of a president who promised to be a moderate and who's been as far left as you can basically get. We've got another 4 years that potentially coming for the country. And you've seen athletes, comedians, sports stars, or movie stars talking about Donald Trump in a positive light. I think some of the stigma may have actually finally broken, which would mean the polls could potentially be close to accurate.